I will start. Yeah, hello, and to our demo about GoDiddy. GoDiddy is SSI-based tool, let's say, short, developed by Danube Tech, and that's why Markus Sabadello is here, and also Kaustabh Barman, and they will short introduce you. My name is Patrick. I'm from TU Berlin, and yeah, please, Markus, and then Kaustabh. Short introduction, and then we can start with the demo.
Okay, yes, thanks, Patrick. Hello, I'm Markus Sabadello from Danube Tech. We are in Vienna, Austria, and working on SSI, self-sovereign identity, and we are most interested in the lower layers of a typical SSI architecture, decentralized identifiers, DIDs. I was one of the editors of the DID core specification at W3C, and that's my main interest, building SSI infrastructure components.
Yeah, and thank you. And I'm Kaustabh. I'm doing my master's in information systems management from TU Berlin. And right now I am writing my thesis, and my topic for my thesis is managing higher education. Managing higher education certificates using self-sovereign identity paradigm. And I'm working with different wallets and trying to evaluate them, and really excited on this project.
Okay, Markus, then stage is yours.
Okay, then I think I'll go ahead and share my screen and start talking about what we do. So let me quickly start with this. The Universal Resolver, I think, is a relatively well-known tool in the SSI community. This is an open source project that we've been doing at DIF, the Decentralized Identity Foundation, for some years, and it's a very simple tool that performs one function, which is DID resolution, right? And that means you pass in a DID, and it resolves the DID to a DID document, and that's sort of the basis for a lot of other things in the SSI universe, right? Whenever you want to verify a credential, whenever you want to log in or authenticate with a DID, whenever you want to establish a DID-COM connection, all these higher level things, they all use DIDs and they all use DID resolution. And that's why a while ago we started this project, which is now an open source community project, the Universal Resolver, which can resolve many different DID methods. So you can use it for ION DIDs, EPSI DIDs, Hyperledger Indy based, DID web, DID key, and so on. It supports about 40 different DID methods. And again, the basic function is very simple. You resolve a DID to a DID document. A second project that's also open source, also at DIF, that we've also been working on for some years. This is a little bit less well known and a little bit less mature and more experimental, but still this exists as well, Universal Registrar. So that is for creating and updating and deactivating DIDs, again, across different DID methods. So we basically try to figure out if we can do the same thing that we did for DID resolution, also for DID write operations. If you want to create or update or deactivate a DID and you want an abstraction layer for that, you want a universal API for doing that independently of what the underlying DID method is. And we've worked on this also for some time. And again, it's a little bit less mature, and it's also technically more complicated, and supports eight different DID methods instead of 40. But still, we've been working on these two tools for some time, basically trying to create a universal abstraction layer on top of DID so that you can build higher level components like wallets or agents or verifiable credentials. And you could use any underlying DID method using a single universal API. So these are two open source projects that we've been working on for some time, and anyone can use them. And then more recently, we started working on this GoDiddy, which is now not an open source project. It's a commercial product. It's a commercial offering that we as Danube Tech are providing, and it's basically a hosted version of these two open source tools, right? It's a hosted SaaS platform, classic software as a service platform, which uses these open source tools, Universal Resolver and Universal Registrar, and makes them available in a convenient way with a convenient user interface. Also more stability, right? We were just talking about how the Universal Resolver that's hosted by diff is not always very stable. It's not always very reliable. Well, that's because it's an open source version without really any stability guarantees. But this here GoDaddy, if you want, is a commercial version of Universal Resolver and Universal Registrar. It's also not free, right? I can talk about pricing and subscription models a little bit later, but it's essentially meant to be a reliable hosted commercial version of Universal Resolver and Universal Registrar tools, plus some additional things, right? So this can also do quite a bit more than you can just do with the open source tools. And yeah, maybe I will just do a little tour of what this is about. And I guess Patrick, or Kaustabh, you can also interrupt if you have questions in between, or if something isn't clear.
One question, Markus. So you mentioned the pricing model. Will the registrar and resolver, which are now available online, then be closed for the midterm?
No. So these tools, Universal Resolver, Universal Registrar, those are also not really Danube Tech projects. They are diff projects, and they will remain open source, and new drivers and new date methods will be added. But
what I'm missing is the verifier service. Is there something in mind or planned for the verifier service?
So as a company, yes, we're also working on these tools, Universal Issuer and Universal Verifier. Those are also not open source. They're also proprietary products right now, if you want. But that's really a separate thing from Resolver, Registrar, and GoDaddy, right? So GoDaddy is all about deeds. This doesn't do anything with VCs, at least right now, and I don't think we have plans to. Well, I'm not sure, but at the moment we're not really planning to add any VC issuing or verifying functionality to this. This is a platform for working with deeds, and that's all it does. It can resolve deeds, it can create, manage, update deeds. There's some advanced functionality for searching and tracking and notifications and some statistics and analysis, but all just on the deed layer, right? So this is not dealing with VCs or agents or DITCOM or OpenID Connect. Does that answer the question? Whereas the other things, Universal Issue, Universal Verifier, is also something that we're working on, but it's not really part of this.
Yeah, thank you.
Right, so it's a platform for working with deeds, and there are basically three different areas of functionality. Broadly speaking, three things that you can do here. One is the first one is resolving deeds. So this is essentially the same thing as the open source Universal Resolver, right? You can resolve a deed to a deed document, and if that's all that you want to do, then you don't really need this GoDaddy service. Maybe you can do this with the open source Universal Resolver. By the way, Universal Resolver and Universal Registrar, the open source tools, they can also be self-hosted, right? You can also just deploy and run them yourself. And in GoDaddy, that same functionality is also available, right? So I can choose an example deed, and it will be resolved to a deed document, right? Here is the deed document. maybe looks a bit nicer and it's probably more stable and reliable, but in terms of functionality, this is pretty much the same as what the open source tool is doing. Some things that GoDaddy offers, which the open source tools don't do, has to do with not just resolving deeds, but dereferencing deed URLs. And there is also quite a bit of documentation and API reference, right? So here, api.godaddy.com is a Swagger open API specification of the interfaces, and here on the docs.godaddy.com, there's a lot of documentation of what you can do. And so on the universal resolver side, as I just said, you can resolve deeds to a deed document. Here are a lot of curl commands, curl examples. This is something you can also do with the open source universal resolver, resolving a deed to a deed document, even in different formats, JSON, LD, CBOR. But then there are also some advanced functions, dereferencing a deed URL. And I can, one example is this here, right? So sometimes we don't just have a deed. We have sometimes a deed with a fragment, for example. This is a deed URL, right? It's a deed with a fragment. What this means is that you're referencing not just the deed document, but you're referencing a specific key, a specific verification method inside the deed document. And this can be dereferenced, right? So if you dereference this entire string, as opposed to just resolving the deed by itself, then the result is a specific key from the deed document. And this is something that, for example, the API here supports. I can do a get request to one of the APIs, and I can pass in this entire deed URL. Let me do a command line demo here. So you can see I'm passing in deeds of the deed, and then a percent encoded the fragment key 1. And if I do this, it will return not the entire deed document, but it will just return that one key from the deed document. So this is one of the more advanced pieces of functionality, and there are several more. I'm not sure how much I should go into detail here. There are a lot of query parameters that are actually defined in the W3C deed core specification. This is the definition of these parameters are not proprietary. This is not something that's specific to GoDaddy or Universal Resolver, but this is actually something that's in the W3C specification. These are service and relative ref. These are parameters that you can add to a deed to reference a specific service endpoint, and then add a relative URI to that service endpoint. And then the result is sort of a constructed URI from the service endpoint and a relative reference. This is not so widely used right now, I think. Maybe this is a bit more interesting. There's a parameter called transform keys. So you probably know that when you look into deed documents, then there are public keys, and these come sometimes with different encodings and different formats, right? Some people have deed documents with an ED25519 verification key 2018, and some deed documents have an ED25519 verification key 2020, and some deed documents have a JSON web key 2020. So the key material can be represented in different ways. And so one way of making that easier is that you can construct a deed URL with a parameter called transform keys. And if you dereference that, then the resolver will transform the keys in the deed document to the format that you want as a client, that it will give you back the deed document in that format. And I can quickly demonstrate that. So let me first do it without this parameter, just resolving the plain deed to the deed document. you see that here in the date document, there are two verification methods. One is ED25519 verification key 2018, and another one is X25519 key agreement key 2019. So maybe if I'm writing a client that only knows how to deal with JWK instead of base 58 encoding, then I could send this parameter, and then the resolver will return the document with the verification methods converted to JSON Web Key 2020, right? So it's also one function for the DTURL dereferencing process, and you can combine these things, right? So, for example, you could construct a DTURL like this, where you add the transform keys parameter and then a fragment. So that means give me that one key, but please return it into a specific format that I want. And these things are also interesting. So version ID and version time, these are also pretty important features in the DIT core specification. This allows you to resolve a DIT at a specific point in time, right? So you're telling the resolver, not you don't want the current DIT document, but you want the DIT document as it was at a specific point in time, where you can pass in a timestamp as a parameter, or you can also pass a version ID or a version number. This is all a bit DIT method specific. This doesn't work with all DIT methods, right? So only DIT methods that actually support this. But this is also supported by the GoDD platform. So for DIT-SOF or DIT-EPSI or DIT-INDI or DIT-ION, for example, there may be changes over time, right? The DIT document can change. And so you can construct a DTURL that will return the DIT document at that specific point in time. And then again, you can combine these things. You can say, give me a DIT document the way how it was 2 months ago, and convert it to JSON Web Key 2020, and then just return that one key with a specific fragment identifier. So you can combine all these things.
Markus, I have one question.
Yeah.
You mentioned that the transformation of a key to, for instance, JWK.
Yeah.
So what happens in the background? Can you briefly explain? Because when I create a key for creation of a DIT, I need a private key. Yeah. And what happens in the background? I need my private key, right? For transforming from one public key to another.
No,
or is it
no.
only changing the type? Or
no, you don't need the private key to transform between these different formats, right? It's just the public key. So the
no.
For example, what I was showing earlier, first without transformation, just resolving a standard DIT-SOF identifier, it gives me back this ED25519 verification key 2020, and this has the public key encoded in base 58. And then if I transform it to JWK, that's something I can do without the private key. It's basically just restructuring this part a little bit. Instead of base 58 encoding, it's base 64 encoding, and then there are these extra properties in here. But no, this doesn't require the private key.
So it's only transforming the public key.
Yeah.
From one to another.
Right. It's just resolving the DIT document using the standard universal resolver, and then it looks at the public keys in the DIT document, and it just converts them to other formats. That's something you can also do with OpenSSL on the command line, right? You can convert between PEM encoding and DARE encoding and JWK.
So would possibly be possible to also transform back, right?
Yes, you can also do it the other way around. If you have a DIT document where you have where you have the JWK format and you want it to be converted to one of the others, then that works too. Right? You can say.
Yeah, that's nice. And one more point from GoDaddy from the part you mentioned. Okay, it's basically the resolver, but on the left side, I see the manage DIDs. At the resolver itself, there are no options managing DIDs, right? So create, update, deactivate, etc. This is not possible with the
right. But this is possible with Universal Registrar, right? So and in the beginning, I said that GoDaddy is essentially Universal Resolver plus Universal Registrar plus some other things. What we covered so far is just this first area, right? Reading DIDs, looking up DIDs, resolving DIDs. The second area is managing DIDs, and this is based on Universal Registrar. So a lot of the things that you can do here in GoDaddy, creating and updating and deactivating DIDs is something you can also do here with this open source tool, also at the Universal Registrar. See, this also has create and update and deactivate.
Okay. Yeah.
The difference is that creating, updating, and deactivating, writing DIDs is, and now let's look at that for a moment. Let's do a little demonstration of that next. That is, of course, more complex than resolving, right? Because resolving a DID is pretty straightforward. You have one input, which is the DID, and you have the output, which is the DID document plus some metadata. But other than that, it's pretty simple. When you look at creating and updating and deactivating DIDs, and those are write operations, and they are more complex for a number of reasons. Because first of all, because you have to pass in additional information. You basically have to say, as an input, if you want to create a DID, you want to say what is the DID document, what do you actually want to have in the DID document, which service endpoints, which public keys do you want in the document when you create the DID. So you also see that the UI here on GoDaddy is more complex than it's in the case of resolving. And then there's the question of key management, right? So like you said before, when you create a DID, you need a private key. So if we create tools such as the open source Universal Registrar or this commercial GoDaddy platform, when you create a DID, then you need to create private keys. And then you need to sign things, right? You need to sign a transaction, maybe if the DID gets written to EPSI or to Hyperledger Indeed, and there need to be key management, signatures, and all of that. And at GoDaddy here, there are two ways of handling that. One way is the easy way, where the keys for the DIDs are generated and stored in the GoDaddy backend, right? So this includes a hosted wallet service. And I know what your immediate reaction is to that, like
private key.
Everybody's reaction, right? This, of course, contradicts to some extent the idea of decentralization and self-sovereign identity, because now you have really GoDaddy is a centralized platform, right? It is a hosted platform. If you create a DID here, then by default, the DID and the keys will be stored here in a hosted wallet inside the centralized platform. I don't want to deny any of that, right? But it's a bit like using using a hosted Bitcoin wallet, right? A lot of people also have their Bitcoins in a hosted wallet, which also has your private keys. In this case, because of that, we think that in some cases this can still be useful, right? So for some experimentation or proofs of concept or test usage, I think it can still be useful and acceptable to have the keys hosted in a platform, in a backend. Because keep in mind that you can always also update the DID document, right? So even if you create a DID here on GoDaddy and the keys are stored here in the backend, one of the main features of DIDs is that you can update the DID document and you can update it to another key pair, which now is maybe only in your local wallet, and then you've basically rotated the keys and taken the date out of GoDaddy, right? So it's possible to create a date here, but then take it elsewhere by just changing the keys. And another mechanism that we've also come up with is what we call a client-managed secret mode. So that means that you can use the GoDaddy platform for creating and updating and deactivating dates. And the platform, the GoDaddy API, will do everything for you. Like it will create the appropriate transactions and data formats, and it will communicate with blockchains and all of what you need for creating the date. It will do all of that, except for the key operation. So we've come up with a protocol where the key creation and the signing can happen on a client side, and all the rest happens on the GoDaddy API, which means that you get the benefit of having this abstraction layer and a universal interface for creating date ion, date soft, date web, date key, and so on. But it's possible to separate that from the key operations. So the platform supports both. It can create and store the date's private keys in the backend, but you can also use the API with a flow, with a certain sequence where the keys stay on the client side. I think it would probably take a bit too long to demonstrate all of that, but there is documentation here on the docs.godaddy.com. You can see here on the left side APIs, universal registrar. It shows how you can use the API for creating different dates. And then there's also a section here, advanced date registration, and this talks a little bit about what we call client-managed secret mode and how you can also use this for while keeping the keys on the client side. But let me just do a quick demo so you can see how it works. The user interface again is a little bit more complex, but basically what you can do is you can here edit the date document that you want. If you want to add, for example, DITCOM service endpoint or EDV service endpoint, you can do that here. And then you say which date method do you want, right? Do you want, for example, to create date solve using the date solve method? We haven't added date indi yet, so that's coming. That's on the roadmap in the next few weeks. This will also support date indi. And yeah, you specify the date document, you specify which date method you want. You specify options and sometimes a secret. So this is date method dependent. This is a little bit different than depending on the date method. For example, you can specify which network do you want to use. And in the case of date solve, you could choose between sovereign mainnet, sovereign buildernet, ID Union, Indicio, some of these Hyperledger Indy-based networks. Or in the case of date ion, you can choose between mainnet, Bitcoin mainnet, or Bitcoin testnet. And in this case, I will create a date using the date solve method, using an internal testnet that we have. And then I click on create. Well, actually, let me also add a service endpoint. We also add here a DITCOM service endpoint. I can add it here, and you can see it's now here in this date document. And then I selected the date method, date solve, and then I click on create date. And in order to see what happened, we're working on improving the user interface a little bit, but to see what happened, you actually have to click here on the second tab where it says request response. And here you can say it says state finished, and here is the new date that you just created. So we will improve the user interface a little bit to make this a bit more intuitive. But basically, I just created a new DID, right? I created a DID using the DIDSolve method with the private key stored in the GoDaddy backend in a hosted wallet. And I should be able to see the DID listed here, right? So now I clicked here on the Manage DIDs page. I already have a lot of DIDs here in my wallet. This is the one I just created. Here are some other ones: DID key, DID ion, DID various one. So that's what just happened, right? With create and manage, I just created a new DID.
So this, what we see here is a user interface you mentioned, which you only can see when you are logged in, right? On the bottom left, there's logged in as Markus. So this is the logged in view. And one question here, there's show one key, show two keys. Is this depends on the method? Like here's key, you have two keys, or why is there show one key or show two key? What is this?
Yes, this depends on the DID method, how many keys you have in the wallet for that DID. So here there's one, this one, DID key, DID ion, they have two keys. DID various one has 4 keys. This depends on the DID method.
And may I ask a question regarding private key storage in the backend? How is this done? I mean, let's say there's a malicious activity or some, let's say, group or people who get access to the database. I know this is a general case, but is my private key there publicly stored, or is this also in an encrypted way stored, the private key? I mean, as this is stored in the cloud, let's say, yeah.
It's stored in the cloud. It's stored in an encrypted way. It's not yet stored in an HSM, right? So to be very, very transparent, probably we could improve that also by using HSM and getting some certifications for data center security and things like that. But I mean, people have also broken into hosted Bitcoin wallets and stolen a lot of Bitcoins. That's just a risk, no matter how much effort you put into securing things. This is a centralized platform, right? That is, I'm not denying that, and of course that has some drawbacks and risks. And what I can say about that is maybe you use this primarily for experimentation on non-sensitive data. Maybe you want to, you also have the option, of course, of not using GoDaddy and using the open source tools, which is probably a bit more effort. Or you use this client managed secret mode, right, that we talked about. So that's also available, where you call this API and it will do everything for you with regard to the DID operations, except for the key stuff. So that would remain on the client side, and then that is then your responsibility. So that is a combination of answers. Of course, we make the wallet service in the backend as secure as possible. So it's not just lying there in a publicly unencrypted text file or so. So we, of course, we have some measures to protect that, but and we have some terms of service and privacy policy and things like that. But of course, it is a central system, and that always, of course, has some trade-offs maybe.
Yeah. But with the managed approach, let's say, or with the managed service, it is a hybrid, right? So you take the key management, or you give the key management back to the decentralized part, let's say, yeah. So what I store my private key on my device or on my cloud service, let's say, would not make sense, but it's not stored in your backend, let's say, in the first option. It's also possible having this hybrid approach, which is good. But what was the decision factor doing this first cloud-based as it is at the moment? Is this the complexity of creating such a, let's say, service?
Well, now if I'm looking back now, it would have been better decision to start first with the decentralized client managed mode, where the keys are not in the cloud service. We should have done it like that from the start, where we really separate the data operations from the key operations. But it has to do historically with this universal registrar tool, how we started with that in diff as an open source project. It was just in the beginning, it took us a long time to figure out these APIs and the protocol and the different steps, how you can build this abstraction layer. And in the beginning, it was just easier to build it with everything happening in one place, right? It's like you can call this, you can say, I want to create a sovereign deed or an EPSI deed or whatever. Then the service does everything for you. It creates the keys, it writes to the blockchain, it constructs messages, whatever, and then it returns to the client, and everything is done, right? That is simpler than this hybrid mode or client managed mode, because in that client managed mode, you actually have to go back and forth a few times. So it's not just one API call with one request and one response, but there's a state and an ongoing process before it's finished. You call the API, you say you want to create a sovereign deed, then the API comes back to you and it says, okay, I can create a sovereign deed for you, but you need to sign this payload here. And then you sign the payload, and then you call the API again, and then it creates the sovereign deed, and then you're finished. So it's a more complex process. And by the way, how that works, how all of that works, there's a separate specification, which again is not proprietary, which again is open in diff. It's the deed registration specification, and that defines all of this. That defines the inputs and the outputs and the sequences and these different architectural modes. Right, here's a description of where the wallet is in the backend, where you just make one call to the registrar service and it will do everything for you, and it also hosts your private keys. So that is simple. And then it has this client managed secret mode, where the wallet is on the client side and the registrar does not do the key operation, but it only does the deed operations. And now it's a bit more complex because you have to go back and forth a few times. But so it took us a long time to figure this out. But now looking back, it would have been better to start with this. But the end result is the same. We basically figured out how to do it both ways, with the key management in the hosted service or with the key management on the client side. And
maybe one question in the diagram.
Yeah, sorry.
Yes. So for signaturing, which I understand that the user, the client side does the signature of, but is there any support to do the signature from Danube Tech, or is it totally on client side how he manages to link?
Kaustabh, you're really not loud. What's the opposite of loud? Silent? I cannot hear you really.
Oh, really? Okay.
Maybe
maybe I'll try to speak louder. If it's
speak
better.
a bit louder, maybe.
Okay. Yeah. So my question was about the signature. Like I understand it is on the client side now. For him to make the signature, But I'm asking, is there any support from the Danube Tech to help make the signature, or is it completely on the client how he manages to make a signature for the API calls?
So you mean, what do you mean support by Danube Tech? I mean, if you do this, what we call the internal secret mode, that's when the keys and also the signatures happen in the backend. So right, so
Yes. Yes, so in this one, this happens on the server end, and you said that it is also stored in the backend.
yes,
And the other way is the external secret mode, I think, where the user, client managed secret mode, where the client has the secret key, and then he signs using that secret key, and then sends an API call back to the data registrar.
right.
My question is, to sign using this secret key, does the client gets some kind of, I don't know, there is a tool from Danube Tech to do that, or is it completely on user how he manages to make the signature?
I mean, it's a standard signature. You can do that with any tool that can create signatures. You can even do it on the command line with OpenSSL.
Okay.
So this is not proprietary, this part, right? It just says here is a certain string, and you have to sign it. It's just like signing a JWT or signing a verifiable credential or signing an email.
Okay.
I mean, also for signing, there are different tools from the libraries. From the Danube Tech libraries.
Yeah.
So
yeah. But the idea of this is that this would maybe be integrated with some other tools, right? Like a client-side wallet. Some people call this an edge wallet, right? Where you could even be a mobile app, right? Maybe this is your Android app, and your Android app knows how to create keys, and it knows how to sign payloads, but it will use this API for the DID stuff, for the communicating with EPSI or Indy or Ion or whatever. And the wallet, the client-side wallet, just wants to create keys and sign things, but it doesn't want to deal with any of the DID specific things.
Yeah, makes sense. Thank you.
That's the idea here.
So for me, everything looks like a fully interoperable SSI solution at the end, let's say in 5 years. So we have one wallet, and the wallet is able to create a DID independent of the tech stack, resolve a DID. Yeah, resolving, you put in a DID and it can be resolved. And then, of course, yeah, a verifier is able to verify all kinds of credentials at the end. For me, this is the first big step, or it's not the first, yeah, for a fully interoperable SSI solution at the end. I don't know. Please correct me, but
I mean, like I said in the beginning, this focus is just on the DID, so it's just trying to solve that one problem, how to be fully interoperable on the DID layer, but it's a prerequisite for everything else, right? For full interoperability, you have to start with the DIDs. And if we just have a few minutes left, maybe I'll also just talk a little bit about this last thing here, unless you have more questions about the resolve and create updates. I also didn't have time to show you update and deactivate. You can try that yourself if you like. Maybe I'll just mention this a little bit. So in addition to resolving, creating, updating, and deactivating, there's also some more advanced functionality for searching. You can see that even here on the front page, here the website shows you the latest 10 DIDs that were created, and these are not the latest 10 deeds that were created here on GoDaddy, but those are the latest 10 deeds that were created globally, right? So what GoDaddy is doing, it's also tracking deeds and deed methods. Right now, it's just showing deed solve on Sovereign Builder.net here on ID Union. It's also tracking deed EPSI and deed ION. So it will show the latest deeds. And there are some search functions where you can say, for example, for a specific deed method like deed ION, you want to see the latest deeds, and it will show you the latest 10 deeds from deed ION. So there was one created about or some deeds in deed ION that were created about 1 hour ago. And you can also look at them and look at their deed documents. So basically, GoDaddy is also a little bit like the Google for deeds, right? So here again is an evil centralized aspect to all of this, right? And in a way, this is also tracking all deeds globally in a central place, right? This sounds super evil, but on the other hand, this is public information, right? Because these deeds, EPSI and Indy and ION and so on, this is all publicly available on blockchains and ledgers. And so GoDaddy also gives you an interface to that global data. So I can search by deed methods. And I can also search for a specific deed. I have one prepared here. If I type here one specific deed, it can say display all known versions. And then for this one deed, I will see that this deed was created on 4th of December 2018, and then it was changed 3 times. So there are 4 different versions. And for each one of them, I can again look at the deed document, how it was at that time. And what's exposed here in the front end, in the user interface, is just a subset of what the API supports. So if you go back to the documentation or the API reference, there are many more queries and things you can do. You can, for example, search for deeds in a specific deed method within a specific time frame. You can say you want all the deeds that were created in February 2019, for example, and you can narrow that down. You can say you only want deeds which have a deedcom service endpoint or something like that. So you can basically run queries against a global database of all the deeds that have been created. And for that, we have many more ideas, many things that can potentially be done. For example, we are imagining that you could set up some notification service where maybe you receive an automatic notification email or text message on your phone or something like that when a certain deed changes, right? Maybe you want to track your personal deed, and if it's being updated without you knowing that, and maybe you want to receive an alert, right? Or we could build a function that analyzes deed documents for known weaknesses. For example, one feature that we've already built is also detecting duplicate keys. We're able to detect if you have a certain deed and there are keys in that deed document, we're able to detect if the same keys are also present in some other deed, either within the same deed method or even in another deed method. We could check if there is a deed created on deed ION, if there are other deeds on deed EPSI which have the same public keys, which could indicate a security vulnerability. And of course, we can create pretty colorful analytics like what you see here on
this is awesome.
Or popularity of deed methods over time. So that's the third area of functionality. The first is resolving dereferencing. The second is creating, updating, deactivating, managing. And the third is this whole search and tracking and notification and analysis.
Yeah, Markus, there are thousands more functionalities maybe possible. Yeah, for instance, also you mentioned the security issues maybe, yeah, you can detect with your Google of DITs, let's say, but you can also detect some sensitive information, for instance, yeah, let's say Patrick Herbke is key value in a DIT document. I don't know, maybe there are some name data sets, yeah, for names, yeah, internationally, globally, I don't know, and then run a matching over all the documents, for instance. Interesting research field and a good possibility, yeah, for study.
Yeah.
Even more, yeah, regarding this opens a whole new analysis world. Really, really awesome. Yeah, Markus, our time is up. Yeah, the statistics really awesome. Yeah, to also get an overview of the tech stacks and as well as the signing algorithms used. And yeah, yeah, this is really EPSI. Aha. Yeah.
EPSI is pretty diverse, yeah, in terms of what
Yeah.
funny things you sometimes find in the documents.
Yeah. Of course, interesting, maybe a research question, not for you, Kaustabh, but for others, maybe. Why? Why is the distribution like this? And why is not everyone using ECDSA SecP 256? Yeah. Are there technical differences or?
In this case, I suspect it's because it's the EPSI pre-production network, and the EPSI design and specifications have also evolved over time, and there are different proofs of concept that have been done.
Testing,
and,
yeah.
not everybody has been using it in the same way.
Yep.
Okay, maybe Kaustabh, do you have let's say last question, because time is yeah.
Actually, no. I had very specific questions, but Markus already answered them without even me asking. I had questions regarding exactly creating DITs and using the API, how to do that, and I think Markus already explained that pretty clearly. So I'm really thankful for that.
Yeah, I mean, if you try it out, I would love to hear from you, and if you have any more questions or feedback,
sure,
Yeah.
I'll definitely try it out.
Yeah, okay, then let's finish up this meeting or this demo. Thank you very much, Markus, for your demonstration of GoDiddy. It's very interesting, and I'm pretty sure that in the next time or mid or long term, we will come back to GoDiddy and evaluate from the university perspective and the research perspective. More topics to come. Yeah, the Google of DITs is very interesting. The combination in one tool, having this resolving mechanisms of DITs and the management of DITs, etc. Everything very interesting from my side. That's why I want to say again, thank you very much, Markus. And yeah, last word I would give to you. Maybe outlook for the next steps. That's last sentence from GoDiddy. Next steps or
next steps are just to expand a bit more the functionality, add support for more DIT methods, and listen to feedback. So if you have anything, please let us know. And of course, thanks also to you again for the invitation.
Okay, thank you. I will stop the recording. Okay, recording is now stopped.